So the purpose, as you know, is to celebrate our top achievers across all academic levels of student, not of staff. And all I really want to say by way of welcome, my name is Alex Broadbent, I'm the Dean of Humanities. All I want to say by way of welcome really is that it's always an amazing achievement to come, to perform well, but it's particularly, I think, an amazing achievement at the moment because it's just such a turbulent time. The past couple of years, in particular in higher education, have been very turbulent. We had Fees Must Fall and so forth, and that affects people in lots of ways. And also just the country as a whole and the world as a whole. And if you're performing well when times are tough, I mean, when I'm doing my own research, I'm always particularly interested in reading papers that were published, for example, in Poland in the Second World War. And, there aren't many, but there are a few, 1942 or whatever. And you think, good Lord, if somebody was thinking about, semantic theories of truth in the middle of this, then that itself is sort of a double achievement. And I sort of feel something similar now. Like if you're performing like this now, then it says a great deal for your strength of character as well as your strength of intellect. So I want to commend you all for that. But I am not a fan of great long speeches. And well, on that note, may I hand over to our keynote speaker for the evening, Professor Kian Tomaselli, who is a distinguished professor in the faculty and is going to give us an address. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, I tried to keep it short. Mr. Dean. Are you settled yet? Okay. Staff, students, and visitors. My favorite book is Malice in Blunderland, which is a compilation of laws affecting organizations and how they are mismanaged. One of these laws is Terman's Law of Innovation, which states that if you want the track team to win the high jump, you find one person who can jump 7 feet and not 7 people who can jump 1 foot. So innovation generally is a highly individualistic affair that does not easily lend itself to collective lowest common denominator approaches. Prizes of the kind that are being awarded here tonight recognize the 7-foot jumper, one who stands out from the norm. Those of you who grew up under the metric system, it's about 1 meter, 2 meters plus a little bit. The team, however, remains a strong base from which to work. The teams here comprise the university, faculty, schools, departments, and administration divisions. And prize winners denote progress, productive change, and an ability to overcome inertia, that is to get beyond 1 foot. So prize-giving ceremonies like this one recognize innovation and achievement, especially as these may benefit everyone. Now, the BA does not stand for bugger all, as humanities skeptics like to claim. It stands for how to solve problems, or it should do. A significant portion of the social, psychological, cultural problems that BA graduates have to solve are created in the first place by antisocial scientists, engineers, technologists, economists, accountants, auditors, and arrogant politicians. And also, qualified professionals often behave as if they are the sole arbiters of truth. Accountants, for example, tend to naively imagine that their profession is only about balance sheets and juggling profit and loss statements. True, but it should also be about the study of power and ideology, money as the ultimate form of class and geopolitical control. Just think of the Bell Pottinger fall in creating the socially divisive myth that enabled 3 Indian brothers to capture the South African economy. Where were the auditors? Where were the accountants? Okay, so those of us in the humanities often feel like orphans, the marginalized, the forgotten. When I first got to the University of Natal in 1985 as a new professor, we humanities scholars were often derided by scientists, engineers, and mathematicians in Senate and resource meetings. We were scorned because our students earned less state subsidy, and we were scoffed at because we tended to be barefoot and wore tatty t-shirts. When students trashed the campus, the Dean of Arts would remark in Senate, ironically, that the protesting students had good organizational skills. Must say we weren't our best advocates in those days. So art students may be the Andy Warhols of the world who might ultimately sell screeds of junk and kitsch and make millions, or in the Web 2.0 age gather instant celebrity on YouTube. This, however, is unlikely. More likely is that university dropouts like Bill Gates of Microsoft, Steve Jobs of Apple, and Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook will make billions. The most innovative technologist on the planet, however, is South African-born Elon Musk of Tesla and SpaceX, who moved from Pretoria to the USA as a young student, and in contrast to the above rogues, accumulated a host of degrees but dropped out of his PhD. No matter, they all changed the world. The rest of us, like Gates, Jobs, and Zuckerberg, actually graduate, unlike Gates, Jobs, and Zuckerberg, actually graduate and barely manage to earn a living. But we do have key roles to play. And as the Dean has pointed out, the more difficult the times, the more the key roles need to come to the fore. So while the humanities everywhere are under threat, the South African national horizon has changed dramatically in recent years. The humanities were put on the national agenda by the Department of Science and Technology and the Department of Higher Education and Training some years ago. And UJ's Peter Vale played a key role in this initiative. And this panel, looking into the future of the humanities in South Africa, laid the philosophical groundwork in the early days of 2010. And this was the ASAF consensus panel on the future of the humanities. ASAF is not a rude acronym. It stands for the Academy of Science of South Africa. It was this panel in which I also served where our research revealed that humanities students or graduates do get jobs. Indeed, they get the jobs in the sectors in which they want to work. Not only that, but they are hugely self-reliant, and more often than not, they work as consultants, being their own bosses, nothing better. The SF panel addressed conceptual, employment, and related issues, while the Dohet Charter aimed at reorganizing the humanities. So the humanistic high ground is claimed by humanities scholars. At the University of KwaZulu-Natal, where we were under threat all the time, we were told often, apart from the fact that our students earned their subsidy, but we were also the soul of the university, but we couldn't find it anywhere. The humanities scholars aim to protect the practice of critique, the dialectic, and thus democracy itself. Social issues are best resolved through research and dialogue. As the word humanities suggests, critique should recognize that it is people, i.e. humans, who feel hope, love, and fear, who occupy structures, often created by alienating regulation and governance. So ASAF recognized that the humanities were in crisis. This is a bunch of scientists recognized that the humanities were in crisis, resulting from contemporary overemphasis on science and technology, career pathing, and financial gain in the context of the developmental state. The stark class disparities in South Africa, given the stark class disparities in South Africa, the humanities are often foolishly considered a luxury. So ASAF recommended the institutionalization of the humanities within national science policy and called for better funding. The international publication of its research and the reproduction of an aging workforce to reproduce itself via PhD acquisition. The Charter, however, speaks to policy matters and institutions. The ASAF study addresses student, parent, employer, and humanities lecturer concerns. The Charter resulted in the establishment of the National Institute of the Humanities and Social Sciences, launched by then Minister Blade Nzimande in 2015, himself a PhD graduate of UKZN. And significantly, the Charter fractured the common sense notion derived from the Berlin Conference of Africa as a homogeneous, isolated entity. Rather, it proposes an open-ended definition that tactically locates Africa in the world. The Charter aims to elevate our institutions into the global arena in which Africans will begin to think about their futures and not just take refuge in imaginaries of the past. So the Charter's planning is in the detail, but the budgeting was in the realm of a perhaps welcome idealism that is going to test the neoliberal imperatives that are ironically pushing the academy in the opposite direction, towards instrumentalism and massification. Yet the debacle over student funding has already seen an attempt by the government to rob Peter, the institute, to pay Paul for free education. We're shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic. University students and projects are the inevitable victims of such poor financial planning. But the two reports read together provide both the analysis and the strategy. Now, popular media images of the academy as a secluded cloister in which bearded, pipe-smoking, elderly, absent-minded, and lethargic academics pore over aging manuscripts is nonsense. As is the stereotype of mad scientists sporting crazy hairstyles, wearing white coats in films like Honey, I Blew Up the Kids, and where they burn themselves on Bunsen burners. This is also nonsense. But remember, it is these harebrained professors who have made the most momentous of scientific discoveries while messing about in their laboratories. Now scientific productivity and claim to employment is measured by systematic output, not in terms of fundamental discoveries recognized by the Nobel Prize. If universities are designed to produce knowledge, to teach students to think, solve problems, to ask new questions, and to reason from first principles, why then is the world in such a mess? Prizes recognize those who have changed or who have the potential to change the world. That's you, the folks who are receiving prizes today. Like anything, recognition comes with obligations, responsibilities, and citizenship. When I was a young student, prizes were less common. The first prize I received as a very young boy at Sunday school, I knew I had not really earned. That I remember this embarrassing fact today, 62 years later, still haunts me. The contemporary culture of entitlement simply confirms a self-serving stasis. It promotes inertia, it is path-dependent, and it reaffirms what did not work in the past. Politicians who endlessly award themselves prizes, medals, and military rank lack self-esteem and wreck the world. Despite their greed, lust for power, and self-aggrandizement, eventually they will fall. Just ask Robert up north. But students who accept their responsibilities can and do change the world, hopefully for the better. That is the imperative that awaits you. Do keep this in mind as you grow older. Value the prizes conferred upon you. Members of selection committees invested real time and real effort in making their selections. Keep jumping 7 feet. Do not settle for the least resistance of jumping 1 foot only. Make a difference, stand out, become a role model. Everyone thereby benefits. And most importantly, remember your alma mater, the institution that enabled your academic achievements. Alumni are members for life, so do help the institution grow. Do help the next generation of students make their ways, as by doing so you will be adding to the value and significance of your own degrees. Alumni also need to ensure that the task of national rebuilding continues to restore the value of public service and to work with students who want to earn their degrees. Alumni have the privilege of hindsight. This is a priceless vantage point to be shared with youngsters who have become disillusioned with the contemporary moment. Our nations are not made in a day. Ours is very young and requires sensible heads to make a difference. Rebuilding is a very long-term process, and we all need to make active contributions. The Organisation for Undoing Tax Abuse, for example, was inaugurated to oppose the outsourcing of our highways to new imperial interests. Successive finance ministers have lost their jobs trying to protect the Treasury and our taxes. Our own Minister of Higher Education, Bladen Zamande, valiantly promoted the humanities when they too were under stress globally. South Africa, like societies everywhere in the current conjuncture, are betwixt and between. New orders are struggling to rise to the surface, old orders are digging in. Contestation is the principle of history. And this is what is meant by the term a luta continua. Negotiation, democratization, and education must underpin viable, sustainable social change. It takes good men and women of all genders and citizens to do something, and they are doing it. Go the extra mile. Do what it takes to get the job done. This is the principle that governs UJ. Most staff do go the extra mile. I know this because at 2 o'clock in the morning, when I'm trying to catch up on a paper that I should have written 6 months ago, I get an email from somebody in administration who must be sitting at their computer at the same time sending out documents that I need for the next day, or that an agenda for a meeting. That's what I mean by go the extra mile. Don't just down tools when you go home at the end of the day. The day continues, the needs continue, the nation continues, and it needs our attention all the time. Okay, so my congratulations then to all of those receiving prizes tonight. I see we're in for a long night. And to their families, their lecturers, and the faculty administrators who work behind the scenes in supporting all of us. So I salute you all.